Hi, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us this evening. I'm Tania Moore, president of Columbia Fiction Foundry. Tonight's program has been organized by Ken Schept, Margie Winslow, and Steve Rosenfeld, who are members of Columbia Fiction Foundry's executive committee. CFF is a SIG, or a shared interest group, supported by the Columbia Alumni Association. There are clubs throughout the U.S. and in over 65 different international locations. Groups are based on interests and affiliations, such as Columbia Pride, Black Alumni Council, Asian Alumni Association, and Columbia Venture Association, to name a few. CFF, founded in 2009, is a community of Columbia-affiliated fiction writers dedicated to improving their craft with the goal of commercial publication. We're somewhat unique within the larger SIG community in that we run fiction writing workshops twice a month, which are free of charge and open to anyone with a Columbia affiliation. In addition to our monthly writing workshops, CFF also hosts special events, which have included interviews with award-winning alumni novelists, panel discussions with literary agents, and events with publishing professionals. In this evening's program, Ken, Margie, and Steve, with the participation of other members of CFF's executive committee, will introduce you to our workshops. They'll answer your questions and, most importantly, encourage you to participate, because any Columbia-affiliated fiction writer is welcome, whether you're polishing up your latest novel or eager to write that story that has been calling to you. Before I hand things over to Ken, I would like to thank the Columbia Alumni Office and Stanley Clark in particular for their support in putting together this evening's program. Without further ado, I'm delighted to introduce Ken Schept.
Okay, thank you, Tania. So as Tania said, the purpose of tonight's webinar is really to encourage you folks to join us in the CFF writing workshops. And to do that, we've put together a brief orientation to sort of demystify exactly what the workshops are about. Again, so I am Ken Schept, and I received my MFA from Columbia in the 1970s. And after that, I spent most of my career writing business journalism. And about 10 years ago, I returned to fiction. And that was just about the time that a group of Columbia graduates, led by Ralph White, founded this Columbia Fiction Workshop. So today, more than 10 years later, Ralph White is an accomplished published author with a major publisher. And as Tania mentioned, CFF has monthly workshops on Saturday mornings and Wednesday evenings, mostly online, but we also have hybrid workshops. And we also produce programming about the business of writing. For example, how to get an agent. And we have a website where members can find information about publishing and writing, and where they can publicize their own accomplishments. So this evening, the CFF Executive Committee is going to expand on all the details of what I've just described and what Tania talked about. So Steve Rosenfeld, Linda Melilli, Linda Raymond Ellison, and Margie Winslow, they'll talk about the workshops, the process and the etiquette, the benefits, and the success stories. And then Michael Hirsh will add a little bit more detail about our website. So the program is being recorded. It's going to take about an hour or 90 minutes, and that sort of depends on the Q&A at the end. So please put your questions in the chat. Some of you submitted questions in advance, and we tried to include a lot of those answers in the presentations that you'll be hearing this evening. So let's begin those presentations, and I'd like now to pass the program over to Steve Rosenfeld. Steve?
Thanks, Ken. So I graduated from Columbia College and Columbia Law School back in the 60s, believe it or not. I practiced law for many years, but when I retired some time ago, I started writing short stories just for fun. I took some classes and workshops and found out how easy it was to start submitting some of my stuff. And over those years, I've been lucky enough to get a bunch of them published. I've been a member of CFF since 2017, and I just want to say, Margie will be talking about success stories, but I just want to say that since I started workshopping at CFF, every one of my stories that got published had come through the CFF workshop process as part of the revision. So the purpose of our workshops, I'm going to talk about the structure of the workshops, and then Lisa will talk about the atmosphere, the ethics, the do's and don'ts. So the purpose is to gather together a group of Columbia alumni who write fiction. We range in age from people in their 20s up to me, and of all kinds of backgrounds: lawyers, business people, people who've written nonfiction, scientists, doctors. And most of us are located in the New York area, but we have members who come into the workshops from as far away as Iceland, Florida, Virginia, and one of our participants tonight from Kentucky. So members submit work in progress to our workshops. So to answer one of the questions, we don't require finished work, but on the other hand, we don't expect rough first drafts. We expect there to have been some revision and certainly editing. The purpose of the workshop is not to edit, it's to critique and offer constructive suggestions. Also, we welcome revisions. And many others have submitted in order to see how the comments worked and whether it's better. So that's fine. I want to stress, though, that we workshop only works of fiction. We're the Columbia Fiction Foundry. So it's, as Tania said, mainly chapters of novels in progress and short stories, but not nonfiction, not journalism, not memoirs, not plays, screenplays, poetry. And we understand that sometimes workshop members submit something that they think is not fiction, but they want it critiqued as fiction. So our standard is anything that is submitted will be critiqued as fiction, and sometimes that can be very helpful to the writer. That means that we'll be looking for elements like narrative, characterization, exposition, development, climax, conclusion. We'll be commenting on the use of metaphors and analogies, the use of dialogue. Does it ring true? Does it help develop character? Those are the kinds of things that you would expect from a critique at our workshop, as most fiction workshops. We're a very congenial, friendly atmosphere, and I'm sure that Lisa will tell you more about that. People have made friendships as participating in the workshops, and some of them have forged one-on-ones. Ken and one of our other members have shared complete drafts of their novels for reading, and that's a wonderful result of our workshops. So we meet twice monthly, once on Saturday mornings and once on Wednesday evenings. Most members tend to pick one or the other, but some attend both, and that's fine. If you submit in a particular month, you're committing yourself to attend the 2-hour workshop and to reading and commenting on the other submissions. One member moderates each month, not always the same one, we rotate, and the moderator introduces everybody, and then, or everybody introduces themselves, as I did just now, and then we take up the manuscripts one at a time. The moderator goes through the manuscripts one at a time and calls on each person attending to give short comments, and depending on how many people attend, the comments can be as short as only a minute or two, but sometimes like last Saturday when we had fewer people and fewer submissions, we had more time. So the way it works is that about 2 weeks before the workshop, those who are on our mailing list, and how do you get on our mailing list? I'll just say that, hold on, I'm going to show you how you get on our mailing list in 1 minute. Let's see, how do I share screen? Okay. Okay, so okay, so this is the page on the home page on our website, and you see right there, if you want to get these invites, you just put your email address here and sign up, and you'll be getting every month, about 2 weeks before the workshop, you'll be getting not as adept as this as I thought, but okay, so you'll be getting an email like this. Hello, CFF members. It tells you when the workshop is. You get one for Wednesday, one for Saturday. And calling for manuscripts, it gives you the guidelines on how the manuscript should be formatted. They can be up to 5,000 words. And the first 6 that come in response to that call are the ones that are workshopped for that Saturday or that Wednesday. So again, workshopping is part of the revision process. So not finished pieces, but certainly not rough first drafts, and they should be proofread. Our attendance tends to be a mixture of regulars, like those of us who are presenting tonight, and new people. Last Saturday, out of, I think Ken was the moderator, I think out of 8 or 9 people, 4 or 5 were people who were new, at least new for me, but I think basically new, and the rest of us, more or less regular. So it's a good mix. Then the first 6 that are received are sent out at least 7 days, sometimes more, prior to the workshop. They're sent to those who have submitted and those who have indicated to the moderator in response to that email that they would like to participate, and many of us do, even if you're not submitting, and that's terrific. So those who submit are expected to read and comment on the other 5, but it's not absolutely required. Passing for submitters, for attenders, passing on 1 or 2 of them is always acceptable, and you shouldn't feel, if you're going to attend, that you have to go through all 6. We welcome participants. We welcome new participants to come and just see what it's all about and ask questions and not critique, but we find that people get into the spirit of it, and we usually get critiques from people who are attending for the first time, and we love that. So in addition to the oral comments, we really encourage our members to submit written comments as well. And the best way to do that is, and I'm going to try one more time here to share my screen. Okay, so the way to do that is to, when you're reading it, they're all submitted in Microsoft Word. And the way to do that is to go to the review function here in Word, and then click on Enable Editing, and that will allow you to edit if you want to. But what more important, it'll allow you to insert comments. So here are, and these are, I picked Ken's. These are my comments on Ken's submission last Saturday. And you can see I put in, nice analogy, Ken, but I'm wondering whether you're not, there are a lot of baseball references in Ken's novel. I said, I wonder if you're expecting too much baseball knowledge from your readers. Just think about that. I commented on one particular phrase that I thought maybe didn't fit, and I put in lots of comments out like that on the margins. And then at the end, one, overall summary comment, which gives Ken my overall prose mainly, because Ken's novel is one I'm really loving reading, and some suggestions. And then when the workshop is over, what I do and what others do is you just take that manuscript with your comments in the margins and you email it to the author. And the author's emails are all there with both the authors, with the email that sends you the submission. So it's really very simple. We encourage you to do that. So that's really all I have to say about the process. And now Lisa will tell you more about how the atmosphere, the etiquette, and the pros and cons of how it all works. Thanks.
Okay, cool. Thanks so much, Steve. Also, Steve and I joined at the same time, 2017. I think I was aware of that. So I actually write under a different name. So I keep myself kind of anonymous. And I have a master's and a doctorate in public health, actually epidemiology, from the School of Public Health at Columbia. I have an MFA from another institution. And and I also work at Presbyterian Hospital. I work in neurology. I do research in Alzheimer's. So that's a little bit about me. So in terms of how we approach the workshops, we do 6 manuscripts in about 2.5 hours. And so we do have a certain amount of time only that we can spend on each of the manuscripts. And it usually works out. Everybody gets to say what they think about the piece that's being reviewed, maybe 3 or 4 minutes. So it's very, very quick. And as a writer, getting that kind of top line often works. It definitely gives you a sense, and also if there's a consensus in the people that are reviewing. So just an idea. But when you're reviewing, the suggestion would be that you start with what works. What is great about the piece? And then the second, where is it that you have questions? So where do you find yourself maybe taking your eyes off the page, being a little bit distracted by what's going on in the manuscript? That's usually a good gauge. And then trying to express it in the best way that's possible. Of course, be respectful. I mean, this is people's work. They spent time on it and they believe in it. Otherwise, they wouldn't be sharing it, and they want to hear your comments. And so you can keep to that. And as Steve mentioned, we don't require. So if you don't get to all the manuscripts, it doesn't matter the reason. We don't ask the reason, but you can certainly pass if you're a reviewer. And we do suggest that people that are new to CFF that they observe a workshop before submitting. And that's something that if you decide that you're going to join, that you can, discuss. So the other thing is being a reviewer, and this is kind of a catchy thing, which is what is the writer trying to achieve? So there may be things that you think as a reviewer. But what is your sense about what the writer is trying to achieve with the piece? So it seems like the writer's trying to do X, Y, Z. And if you can kind of generate that thinking, that it makes it easier and probably clearer and also more helpful to the writer if you go on that track, if at all possible. And if you're not getting it, then that's something to say, so that the author can hear that. And then move on. So we also do recommend that people send written comments after the workshop. And Steve showed you one way we can do track changes, which is great. You can write letters. You can annotate, within the manuscript suggestions, etc. So when they send out the manuscripts, usually you will see all of the author emails within that email that you receive with the manuscript, so that it's easy for you then to provide written comments by email. So if you're the writer, which is a different thing, if you haven't workshop work, then it can feel very bizarre. What are these people talking about? That kind of thing. And, they're in left foot. They don't really understand. These are all kind of natural things. So one piece of advice that is really good and very helpful is to kind of look away, to kind of distance yourself a little bit from what's going on, what people are saying, and just take notes. And don't think too much. You'll be able to think, the day after or the day after that. Not that anything horrible will happen, but as a writer, I find this a very healthy approach. This is something that I do, and I'm making this suggestion to you as well, because the idea is you own the piece, okay? No one that's reviewing it owns it. It is yours. So what you do with what you're hearing and what note-taking and what kind of comments that you're going to receive, it's up to you, okay? So you're on solid ground, no matter what. And I'm going to also offer one other piece of advice, and that is that when there's a comment that's made, it's usually because a reader stops, is interrupted. And some people describe fiction as sort of being in a dream world, and this is true, right? We're inhabiting characters' lives and a plot that's being put forward. So just look at the place where the comment is. And I will tell you a little trick. The problem may not exist exactly there. And this is part of the revision process, which is that you need to pay attention and think through and problem solve when you're doing your revision. Another really key thing and very important is that when we're doing the review, writers do not talk. So you don't need to, make a case for what you're trying to do. If you do that, you won't get a fair reading, but just let the review happen. And when we get to the end of the review, then writers will have about a minute and a half to ask what we call a clarifying question. And what this means is that you ask, I heard you said this. Could you tell me more about that comment? So you can probe a little bit, but nothing beyond what the reviewers have said. All right. So it's just your time to ask a question about what a reviewer has said about your piece. And that's it. So we did get a question about what's the quote unquote preferred reviewer, revision process, and about writing styles, like when do you write, what type of schedule, all this kind of stuff. So I've both not worked as a writer, and I've also worked with a very heavy commute as a writer. And I've also had work where I travel a lot. You will come up with your own schedule. And people talk about writing every day, and that may not always be practical. And this is where actually participating in something that is ongoing, so on a monthly basis, we have Saturday and Wednesday, that you're gearing yourself up to do a submission. So it's a really good bell ringer. I've got to get to it. I've got to finish this. And you'd be surprised that the letter will go out inviting people to submit, and the slots get taken very quickly. So make sure you're prepared. So the other thing that I wanted to say is that when you're revising, that's actually where the piece will come together. And it's not going to happen overnight. So it's not like an exam that you have to take right away, nor is it a report for school that you have to have done within a certain period of time. And I have found actually that particularly with short stories, because they're like puzzle pieces, that a length of time is often required. I had one short story I worked on for like 12 years. I'm not kidding you. I had another one that, it took about a year. So don't be surprised. Just be very patient. And it's about, quote unquote, mastering your craft. You're going to find out what works for you. And then we also had a question about how do you know when your piece is done? So here's a little, my own little gauge or whatever. I might think a piece is finished. And again, For me, this is like after at least a year. So it's not like a month later. And I do let things sit so that I forget and then I can go back and work on them. So let's say after a year plus time, I'll start submitting. And so submitting, let's say, to literary journals, you might have to go to a lot. And it might end up being 56. It's happened to me, okay? Because it's a luck of the draw. And so I usually send out to maybe 9, and then I get a sense of how it's being received. And if I'm not okay, right, everybody rejects it, and I don't get anything else back, then I go back and look at the piece, and I'll have, my critical eye out as to what else do I need to do. Another piece about revision is also reading. So reading literary journals, obviously reading novels, et cetera, because I have found that some writer will do something and I'm like, aha, that is my solution. So you can see that it's a process. And we hope to see you Saturday or Wednesday. And we hope you're enjoying our session. And I'm going to pass it on to Linda.
Thank you. And hello. I'm glad that you're here, and I'm glad that you're interested in Columbia Fiction Foundry. CFF workshops have been important to me, even though I've been a professional writer for many years, because I've started writing my first novel. And one of the things I really enjoy about CFF workshops is that we do have people who bring perspectives from a variety of backgrounds. I grew up in the South. I went to University of Virginia's Women's College and started work as a newspaper reporter in rural Virginia. 3 years later, I left for Columbia's Graduate School of Journalism, a very different environment. Then for 30 years, I worked at the Courier-Journal and Louisville Times, which was at that time one of the country's top newspapers. And when Gannett Corporation bought us, I returned to my old love, which was teaching college students to write. Now I'm writer in residence at a historically Black college, a tiny little school in Louisville, Kentucky. All of that helped shape the novel I've brought to Fiction Foundry workshops, chapter by chapter, for the last 2 years. I was moved to write fiction during Donald Trump's first impeachment trial when I realized how very much our time is like the period between 1830 and 1870. I wanted to explore some themes in a way that my nonfiction background didn't allow. That led me to write a fiction story that was on carefully researched history about a young woman, an avid abolitionist in Oberlin, Ohio, who suddenly inherited a plantation and slaves on stolen Choctaw land in Mississippi. The story has love, mystery, tragedy, and I hope a future as a novel that gets published that people will read. For CFF workshops, I zoom in from Kentucky, and I'm often amazed by the questions and reactions that workshop members have to things we Southerners just take for granted. And I'm very grateful for that because I hope people in the North will read my book too. We all bring different writing issues as well as different backgrounds. My workshop group has helped me a lot, especially to use dialogue and action to reveal personality. It's helped wean me from the deep voice musings that journalists are prone to. The chapters that I bring to workshops have been revised maybe a dozen times until I don't know how to make them better. And then the group helps me improve. I've also learned from reading and critiquing others' works and from listening to the comments members make about very different narratives that fellow members bring. Reading 5 manuscripts, you can do the math, 5,000 words times 5 a month is very time consuming, and preparing useful critiques is demanding and requires a real commitment. However, I hope that my reflections help others in the group, and I know that critiquing fantasy, science fiction, future dystopian, and literary novels makes me think about writing in new ways. After a while, my workshop colleagues' advice starts getting in my head. Show, don't tell, I'll hear someone in the group say when I start writing a dense but brilliant paragraph with all sorts of wit and insight. Or the group in my head will say, more dialogue. You need more dialogue. When I hear that at my home computer, I sigh deeply, I hit the delete key, and try to think about what my heroine would say. She's more real, and the book is deeper as a result, and I am grateful. In my experience, writers are rarely good judges of their own work. So I'm also very, very grateful for my workshop group's encouragement. My group has helped me believe that my dream of writing a book of meaningful fiction can actually happen. And they've helped me make that fiction much deeper and much more readable than I ever could have done alone. That's why I can recommend the workshops to you. And as we say here in the South, y'all come on down. And so now I'll pass the Zoom screen to someone who knows much more than I do about some of your most frequent questions. Margie Winslow is shortlisted for the 2024 Debut Dagger Award of the Crime Writers Association of the UK for her historical mystery, Cradle of Storms. And she is an author that agents are actually seeking out. So enjoy, Margie.
Margie.
Okay. Yes. Yeah. Thank you for that lovely introduction, Linda. My degrees from Columbia are in the geological sciences. So as a geologist, I've been honored to share my first fiction efforts at the CFF. I've been a member since 2015, although I don't think I submitted until I had attended for a full year. The feedback in the groups is always helpful as well as kind. I'm very happy to share with you a few of the success stories of the Columbia Fiction Foundry. I don't have time to celebrate all of them. I found about 18 on my own bookshelves, and I'm sure that somebody will be annoyed at me, but I'll mention some of the authors who have achieved notable success as in awards, reviews, and often sales. First off is Jennifer Kitsy's Small Hours, a literary novel published by Grand Central Publishing. Frances Cha, If I Had Your Face, which has had reviews in Time and NPR. And she also spoke at the Columbia Fiction Foundry. Parul Kapoor, who recently spoke at the Columbia Fiction Foundry, who wrote Inside the Mirror, which is with the University of Nebraska Press. And then I have 2 domestic thrillers, which are really hot, or at least they were in the last couple of years. Greer Hendricks, The Wife Between Us, and Danila Petrova's Her Daughter's Mother. and these are both bestsellers and have been widely reviewed. And then one more, Julia Kite, The Hope and Anchor, which is a literary mystery set in London. I also want to mention 3 of our writers who have published short stories in prestigious journals, and that includes Steve Rosenfeld, Michael Vines, and Marcel Thiebaud. Michael Vines and Marcel Thiebaud have also collected their published works into books, if you want to look for them on Amazon. There are also many more who have in the CFF who have published with hybrid publishers or have been self-published. And they often are winning prizes and receive excellent reviews. I'm thrilled to say that the agent I chose is currently pitching my historical novel, Cradle of Storms, which recounts a little-known tragedy in Alaska during World War II, when an entire village disappeared. And I will stop there for now and cue up Michael Hirsh, who's a distinguished journalist and excellent fiction writer. And he's going to talk about the Columbia Fiction Foundry website.
Thanks, Margie. And everyone, hello, everyone out there in webinar land. So I don't want to go on too much because you can see for yourself if you log on to Columbia Fiction Foundry what we do. We have different sections, the news, which I handle. And if you have any publishing news of any kind, just send me an email, which you can find on the site hirschmeister@gmail.com. Just giving a synopsis of the piece, whether it's a novel or a short story, and a summary of your own personal history, just one graph bio, and then we like to publish a PDF of the cover if it's a novel, as well as an author profile. And you can also see that we regularly list our events, a couple of which have been mentioned. One of the great things we do occasionally, which the last one I believe was organized by Tania, was something we did in last year with the Di Fiore and Company, which is a very prestigious agency based in New York. And they spent an hour to an hour and a half with us membership who just took part, giving us advice on how to pitch, how to pick an agent, all very useful things. Another thing that we try to do is, in addition to helping people with their actual writing during the workshops, is to supply advice on what has become the hugely complex world of publishing, where it's no longer what they call the big 5 publishers. There are so many different kinds of ways of publishing, that is. And there's actually something that we like to list at the bottom of the news section, which is a rating system by the Association of Independent Authors of all the different publishing houses out there, including a lot of scam ones, including a lot of self-publishing outfits that just want to take your money. And that's the last you hear from them. But there are also many so-called hybrid publishers where the author does pay up a certain amount of money, but they have, they produce a very professional-looking piece of work, and they help with the publication of it. I was just at my local Barnes & Noble in Alexandria, Virginia recently, and there standing by the front door was an author named Margaret Rodenberg, who had just published a historical novel called Finding Napoleon, which was published by a company called She Writes, which is one of these hybrid publishers. And she seemed quite happy with the results. And it's really become such a difficult world out there because frankly, the big five publishers don't really know what they're doing anymore. I don't know if any of you followed or heard about the trial, the antitrust case that occurred with Random House and Simon and Schuster a couple of years ago. But the publisher of Random House was famously quoted as saying, well, you know, publishing is random, bestsellers are random. That's why we're called Random House, because we don't really know what we're doing. So, you know, sometimes there's a temptation to be daunted by the publishing world, and I'm urging you not to. And I think that the community, the CFF community, can be a great help there. And there are some outlets that I would recommend. One that I find useful is Poets and Writers, which I subscribe to. It's very cheap. There was actually a terrific special section that they produced in their November-December issue from last year called Outside the Big Five, which goes into all the other options there are for publishing, including university presses, which we highlighted in the event with Perul, which was alluded to before. Who she won a very prestigious award after being published by the University of Nebraska Press. So anyway, if you have any publishing news or any publishing questions about you know, the publishing world, you can email me or any of the other executive committee members. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, everyone else, all the presenters. So we're really up to the question and answer portion of the evening. So I would encourage anybody, those of you who are listening, if you have questions, we tried to answer as many as we could based on what had been submitted, but I'm sure there may be other questions. So this would be a good time to put them in the chat while we're going to answer a few more of the questions that had been submitted earlier than tonight when the invitation went out. So several people asked about this whole idea about finding an agent, which is something that many of us are trying to do, and it can be daunting and certainly complicated and time-consuming. People wanted to know what's the best way to connect with a literary agent, especially as an unpublished author. Is it possible to get a referral, and other specific questions? Well, you've just heard from Margie, and I'm going to refer back to Margie because she's been successful at getting an agent, and maybe she can expand, she can answer these questions with some authority. So, Margie?
Okay, I'm happy to do that. Yeah, when I was looking for an agent for my nonfiction, it took 23 queries. So I have some experience with rejection, and which is part of what we should all be prepared for. I just want to go through a couple of things. One is the first step usually is to write a query. And it's very important to go to the agent's website and follow the directions exactly. If they want 2 pages, you send 2, you don't send 50, and vice versa. Also, agents do move around, and I know one agent I applied to is only representing crafts books now. So the sites on query, was it query search and agent search are not necessarily up to date. Okay, and I hope you all know how to write a query. And if you don't, there are many sources for how to write a succinct query. And make sure you have someone edit it, even if you were an A+ student. There's always something. This is your chance to shine. And I tend to send out, I tended to send out batches of 6 at a time. And that gives you time to get feedback. And it might be useful feedback, and you might want to revise things a little bit before the next 6. People who send out 50 in a row sometimes miss out on that part. Now, in today's difficult market, some agents don't respond to unsolicited queries at all, which is extremely rude, but it's a fact of life. So if possible, and this worked for me, attend conferences or online webinars whenever possible, so that you can mention that you at least met them or you were impressed by something they said. So a little bit of a connection there. If you don't have any connection at all, you can read some of the books they represent and say, oh, when I saw that you represent this particular book, then I thought you might be interested in mine. So make some kind of connection, so it's not just, dear Ms. Smith. And I mentioned before, prepare for a rejection. Some of the top authors in the world have had, 50, 60, 70 rejections. So when do you give up? Well, that's a subjective thing. So you have to decide, but do allow, they're not personal. You have to allow them. And also, if you're lucky, some of the rejections will come with comments that can be very helpful. And if you have 2 or 3 responding and they say, the ending doesn't work for me or something, then pay attention to it, because these are professionals and they're taking the time to write you a couple of lines. So that's what I would do. And then last but not least, enter legitimate contests. There are a number of them listed in Poets and Writers. And you can even Google, mystery writing contest. There are ones out there that like to collect money and don't do anything for you. And there are others that have in the small print that you can only publish with their publishing contact. But what I call the legitimate ones, like Mystery Writers of America, Crime Writers Association of the UK, which is one I placed in. There are a number of good ones in your genre. Enter them, and they shouldn't cost more than $30, $50 at the most. And because that is what made the difference for me. I had 2 agents contact me, 2 publishers, before I even sent a query out, wanting full manuscripts. And because I wanted a particular kind of agent, I continued to query. And by mentioning that I had been shortlisted for the CWA, I always got an answer, which is something we don't, I understand 2 out of 100 people get some answer where they request a partial or a complete manuscript. So that really made all the difference. And so I recommend that very highly.
Thank you, Margie. That was extremely helpful. And based on your experience, congratulations. Very remarkable to find an agent. That said, Tania Moore has also successfully found an agent and has workshopped her stuff, her manuscripts with CFF. So Tania, maybe you can talk a little bit about your success.
Sure. Well, I would just add on, Margie, that was great. And really, Margie gave excellent advice. So I would just add a couple things to that. One is Publishers Marketplace, which is an invaluable resource. It's $25 a month. I think it's less if you pay for the year. This is an incredibly important database because you can look up every agent and their sales and the books that they've sold. And that can be a great way, in addition to going to conferences, which I'm not really great at doing that. They're expensive, it's time consuming, and it really is such a good way to get an agent. I know Parul Kapoor also got her agent by meeting someone that is 100% right. But if you go onto Publishers Marketplace, you can find out a lot about these agents, and that also can help you with your initial introduction to them, so how you know them. That's one thing. The other thing is really know your genre. And how do you do that? You look at other books that are like yours. Agents are looking for they're looking for a wonderfully written book, a book that is in the kind of book that they like to represent, and they're looking for a book that they can sell. And so a lot of that has fallen onto that work has fallen onto authors themselves. So it would be really nice if we could get an agent who will then figure out how to market our book. But unfortunately, in today's world, we kind of have to know a little bit about that ourselves. So that will help you. And the other thing I would say is there's so many resources online about how to write a really, really good query letter. It can feel daunting to send a query letter into the slush pile and like you'll never hear from it again. But you know, for my latest book, I actually parted ways with my agent from Trident Media, which is a top agency. And but with my current book, I have 8 requests for 8 full manuscripts, and this is based on my query letter. So and the sample pages. So it actually can work. So don't be totally discouraged. And I think if you do a little bit of research that way and keep your database and keep sending out, people do get agents. So those are just a few extra little tips that I would throw into the pot.
That's great. Thank you, Tania. We also received some publishing related questions. So if you back it up before the point when you're actually going out to look for an agent, someone was saying they completed my first draft and going to do major revisions. How do I know whether I'm done or whether I should hire a consultant or some kind of development editor to look at my manuscript? So Lisa, who runs our Wednesday group, has done a lot of work herself and thinking about this. So Lisa, maybe you can respond.
Yeah, I did have a novel that was actually read by agents and by publishers, and I will tell you what you might think is an unhappy ending, but ended up being a very happy ending, because they told me in one sentence what I had to work on. Basically to redo, to address it in the book before I resubmitted. So I have used editors. There's also something called a beta reader, which essentially is somebody you may or may not know personally, but they read your book or they'll read your work as if they are a regular reader. And a lot of times they are writers themselves. And so some of us in CFF, we've done it for each other, because novels are, I just finished another novel, and and I have an arrangement with somebody in CFF to be a beta reader, and I'm probably going to ask somebody else as well. So in other words, to get other people to read, I will tell you that a novel, you really need to revise and revise and revise. It is not, most novelists, it's like a 5-year project at least. So don't be daunted by that. But I think writing is like being like a team sport. That it's not something you can really shut yourself in a room and do by yourself. You really need a community around you, which is one of the reasons why CFF was created. But to have other people read your work, even as you're revising, etc. So an editor can be very good. I've done that. A beta reader, usually, people don't charge, other writers to read their work. And the other, I think, what you've heard from Tania and also from Margie, going to conferences and meeting people, then you can find the people that really know. Also, other workshops, like Bread Loaf is superb. That is probably the best one that I have done, but I've done, a number of them. So they're usually week-long workshops. Some publishers like One Story, some other literary journals, they also have workshops. And CFF. So that would be gather the community around you, because writing is a team sport. So I hope I'm answering your question.
That's great. Thank you, Lisa. So if people have questions, this is a good time now to submit it into the chat or into the Q&A. In the meantime, we have one other question that we didn't get to at our presentations that was submitted earlier. And it's sort of a technical kind of question. Given the stories about AI and plagiarism or near plagiarism, are there risks in submitting or getting published in any online journals? So Steve has been published in both physical magazines and online in online journals. So Steve, would you like to respond to that?
Yes, thanks, Ken. I just want to answer one of the questions that was submitted in the chat, which was responding to my showing how you enter comments in Word. And this person said, well, I have a Mac and I have Pages. Does it work with that? And I'm not a Mac user, but I assume when you get a document that's in Word, you can convert it to a Pages document and then use the equivalent function in Pages and then send it back that way. But that's just an assumption. I want to say that the way I started submitting, because when I started writing short stories, I never really expected to get them published, but I took a few of those one-story workshops that Lisa just mentioned, and One Story does both. They mainly do online now since COVID, but then they would do live workshops. I took a few of them, and I learned how to submit using two web-based functions, duotrope and submittable, which are absolutely critical for short story writers, and they don't cost a lot. Most, I think maybe 75% now of literary magazines, both online and print, use submittable as the way to receive submissions. So you can subscribe to both. And then once you've subscribed to submittable, all your data is kept there. So when you submit to a new lit mag that you've never submitted to before, if it uses submittable, it fills out all of your information. You don't have to start from scratch. Duotrope also has the advantage of having a function that allows you to keep track of all your submissions. And as they go out, as you get rejections, mainly rejections, as you get acceptances, hopefully. Oh, also, Duotrope also sends a weekly bulletin to all its subscribers, which includes agents that are available for submissions. I don't, since I write short stories, I don't check that, but that may be another way to find an agent. So to then answer the specific question about, do you have to worry about plagiarism if you're submitting to online journals? I've never worried about it. More than half, or more maybe now, of literary magazines publish both, either only online or both print and online journals. It's an accepted way of literary magazines publishing. When you are published, you keep the copyright, and I don't really think, but I'm no expert on AI, that getting published in an online journal exposes you to plagiarism any more than getting published anywhere else. And I would not urge anybody to be reluctant to submit to online journals for fear of plagiarism, because you have a better chance at acceptance with these online journals. And I've had, as I said, a bunch published. Maybe half of them are in both a hybrid print and online, and the other half are just online. And I'm very proud to put on the Columbia Fiction Foundry website news and send to Michael news of my being published in an online journal. I'm as proud of that as I am when I can see it on my shelf.
Okay, thank you, Steve. So we are coming towards the close of the orientation. If there are other questions, please put them in the Q&A or in the chat, and we'll respond. There is one question that I'll take, which is this the only fiction? Is this only for fiction written for adults, or can writers working on fiction projects for young adults, are they also welcome? So the answer to that is yes. It can be young adult, middle grade, any of those other categories. In fact, Saturday, I think we had at least 2 pieces that were of either middle grade or young adult. It just has to be fiction. I actually submitted my own work on Saturday because I wasn't sure whether I had something that was young adult or an adult work with an adolescent narrator. And as usual, the workshop was extremely helpful and helped me clarify what I think I had written. So I actually do not see any other questions
And
now.
if I may, I just would like to add to that, because we did have one experience with that.
Steve.
That we don't do children's books, because we had a longtime member who had been submitting either an adult or young adult novel, but decided that she wanted to try a picture book for children. And we workshopped it once, but we said to her, we really don't feel we're equipped to critique children's literature for little kids.
Okay, thank you for that clarification, Steve. I think the question is, what's the age range of the group and the gender? I would say, I'll just answer that quickly. It's very mixed. Just on Saturday, we had someone who had recently gotten their MFA, and we had me who had received an MFA, in the 70s. So age, gender, it's just diverse. We welcome everybody, and that's really the benefit, because you want intelligent readers. You want all these voices, because that's who our readers are. And so we need that. That's very helpful in trying to understand what it is we're writing and how we can improve it. Before I pass this back to Tania, I know Steve had just had a comment. I learned a huge amount myself tonight listening to all my colleagues. Are there any other comments that any of our presenters want to make? Anything that occurred to them during this orientation that they didn't have an opportunity to express? I mean, if not, I would thank our audience for, I think another question came in. I'm going to read this. I'm very committed to screenwriting for my own films. For the time being, I'm working on short films. Can I submit short film manuscripts? Should I translate those into prose? Steve, I'm going to call on you for this, Steve, because I know you had some thoughts about it.
Well, yes, and we do not critique, and we don't think we're really equipped to critique screenplays or even treatments for screenplays. If you want to turn your screenplay into a short story or a novel chapters and get it critiqued as fiction, as I said, with all of the elements of fiction being what we're used to looking for and commenting on, sure, but you have to expect it to be read and critiqued as a piece of fiction. And if it's submitted in the form of a play or a screenplay, we will politely ask you to withdraw.
Yeah, I would just add to that we did have a member who is actually a playwright, but the piece that she submitted to us was a novelization of a play that she had written. So that certainly would be appropriate. Again, I just want to express my appreciation to everyone who presented, and to the audience. I hope this has been helpful. As I said, it's been helpful to me, and we hope to see many of you either on a Saturday morning or a Wednesday evening as participants in the workshops, colleagues, so we can get to read what you're reading, which I'm sure would be very, very compelling and interesting for us, something we could learn from, and obviously you could learn from us as well. And with that, I think I will turn it back to Tania Moore, president of CFF. Tania.
Hi, yes, thank you so much, everyone, our panelists. That was really interesting, even for me, and certainly to our audience members. I just want to address one of the questions, which was that about diversity in age, gender, and background. And if you look at this the group of panelists, the executive committee, you might say to yourself, they are all older and white. And that is absolutely correct. That is not by design. we would love to have as much diversity as we can. And some of it, I think, has to do with, and we've invited people, and I think some of it has to do with when you're younger, honestly, you're working full time, you're raising a family, so you have a little bit more time as you get older, and that might be one of the reasons that people who have a little more time to volunteer end up in these leadership positions. But if you would like to get involved, there are many ways to do so, and we 100% invite you to. And our workshops are also much more, a little bit more of a mix. So just wanted to address that, and I don't have anything else to add other than to say thank you again to Stanley, to Ken, Michael, Linda, Margie, Steve, and Lisa, and to all of our members. And I hope you enjoyed this beautiful day and our presentation, and I hope to see you at one of our workshops very soon.
So long.